Welcome back to the Columbus, Ohio Real Estate Show, where we dive into the stats and news that impact the Columbus, Ohio real estate market. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in Columbus, Ohio, or just want to stay informed, we hope you find this information useful in your real estate journey. I'm your host, Ryan Dieter with Key Realty, and today we're going to actually talk about how to get your offer accepted in a competitive market situation. If you watch the news, you may have seen that, hey, things are getting less competitive, but here in Columbus, things are still competitive, and if it's priced well, it's most likely going to sell that first weekend. And we're getting ready to head into the spring market, so even more competition is going to hit them, come in, more buyers are going to hit the market, so therefore the competition is going to increase, and you need to be prepared if you're looking to make a change and want to buy a house, or if you're looking to sell your house, how to position your house the best to get these best offers as well. And we're going to talk about how to make your offer more enticing without just raising the price. Obviously, price is a big factor, and it's often the most important factor, but there's other factors that go into making your offer competitive. I'm going to talk about that today and how to prepare you if you're going into this market. And we're sitting here in February, and the market really starts to change in March. So we're about a month out before we would start to see the market really ramp up. And we're seeing a little early ramp up, in my opinion, here in Columbus in certain areas. If you watch my latest videos, we're noticing that certain areas are still doing really well and really competitive, where other areas are actually having more inventory and a little bit more buyer choices, a little bit more negotiations take place. So it depends on what area you want to focus on or where you're looking to move, that this information would be more useful for you or not, or if you're able to negotiate more on as a buyer versus having to make your offer more competitive. So let's dive into it. First, I want to talk about the mindset of a seller. You got to understand the mindset of a seller to understand why these things are important. So let's talk about that for just a second. The mindset of a seller when they hit the market. So they list their house that first weekend. So the first week really through the first weekend, they're expecting full price. They're expecting to get the full price offer that they're listed at, if not more. They may have been seeing they may have had some friends down the street that sold. They listed at a price and they sold for over that price. So that may be their expectation that first weekend. So as a buyer, if you come in and offer, 20, 50K under the list price, doesn't matter what the value is. Keep in mind, I always harp that the list price is not value. The list price is a marketing tool. The only way to determine value is what someone's willing to pay for it, what a buyer is actually willing to pay for it. So forget about value for a second. We're talking about the mindset of a seller and what they expect. Where they think value is basically what they position the price at. A good agent's going to help a seller understand that, the list price is a marketing tool, not value. But most sellers don't understand that, and so they're thinking that the value is full price, if not more. And so they expect that the first weekend. So if you're a buyer, you got to think like and sometimes sellers that do understand that actually price their house on fair. And if, as a buyer, if you think it's a fair price for what it is, then most likely there's going to be other buyers that think the same thing, and they are going to go and look at it. They are probably going to make offers on it. So with that said, if you're not willing to make a full price offer, if you're not willing to come in at least close to full price, then it's best to wait. And so let it sit for a little bit, and if someone else buys it at that price, so be it. But that's kind of the game you got to play as a buyer. Because the first weekend, the sellers expect that full price. And if you come in too low, you're going to offend them, and they're not even going to entertain your offer. And then you come back, and they may have already kind of wrote off you, but you are willing to entertain other buyers that are maybe making low offers because of you kind of just offended them up front. So you don't want to come in too aggressive, too low that first weekend. Second weekend, they're still expecting that full price, but they're starting to see the cracks in it, and they may say, hey, we may not get full price, but we may get close to it. But it's the flip side. I've also seen houses that sat for a week or two even, that where other buyers were just waiting. They were waiting for somebody else to make the first move, and then they would jump on it. And so kind of that strategy of wait and see what happens, because you don't want to pay full price. All of a sudden someone else is willing to make an offer, then you come in, and all of a sudden now we get the bidding war a couple weeks after. So it can happen. Is it the norm? No. So that second weekend is where sellers are willing to say, okay, maybe we can have a little negotiation power, but not a ton here. So the third weekend is, again, every time, every time the longer the house sits in the market, the more likely you are as a buyer to negotiate. But I want to focus on that first weekend, because here in the next few months, we're going to start seeing houses hit the market and fly off the shelf. And so I want to prepare buyers that if you are going to make an offer that first weekend, these are things that can help you get your offer more likely to be accepted. It's not a guarantee, obviously, but more likely to be looked at and get in a favorable way, and also help you get your offer accepted without having to just raise the price. Okay, because, and I will say about 90% of the factors, 90% of the time, we talk to another agent, say, hey, what's the most important thing to the seller? 90% of the time, it's going to be price. Price is a huge factor, of course. You're not going to win an offer, by coming in $50K under the list price when someone else is at full price. The other terms aren't going to matter quite as much in that situation. But if it's neck to neck, and if you have, within 5K, even 10K, those other terms in the offer may be what is the deciding factor of the seller picking your offer over somebody else's, even if it's less than the other offer and price. So some of those terms are, of course, the type of financing. What kind of financing are you doing, or are you doing cash? So obviously, we all hear and we all know cash is king. And the reason why cash is king is because there's certain things that you don't have to do if you come with cash. It's not just that, sellers, they get paid either way, whether you pay cash or finance it. At the end of the day, they still get their money. So why is cash king? It's because as there's less hoops you got to jump through when it comes to getting a loan approved. They don't have to worry, the seller doesn't have to worry about approval from the lender. And there's a couple things that have to take place with that. First, they have to do what's called an appraisal. The bank has to order an appraisal to say, do we think the offer that the buyer made is reasonable and at value of the house? Because they're not going to give you a loan unless they think the house is worth what you offer. So even if you offer, full price, and the lender says, wait a second, there's no data, there's no logic to show that full price is reasonable, because the seller just picks the price. The seller and the seller's agent, whoever it is, they come up with a price, and they could come up with a price that's 100K, 200K over what the next house like it has sold in the neighborhood, and you may agree to it, but the bank's not going to say yes to that just because you offered it and that was a list price. And so they do their own, comparison of what's sold. The appraiser, the best way to look at it is the appraiser is always looking in the rearview mirror. What is sold? What data can we use to justify this purchase? And the problem with it is that the lender will only give the loan amount up to the price that they say it's worth. Doesn't matter how much you're putting down. If you're putting 20% down, they're still only going to give you a loan amount with that 20% up to the price of their appraised value. Now you can decide as a buyer, do we want to bring extra money to the table to still buy this? And that's up to you. And the seller can decide to lower the price if the appraisal comes in low. But if there's multiple offers, this is a huge factor if there's an appraisal or if there's not an appraisal. If you have a cash offer versus a conventional financing offer or any other kind of financing offers, the cash offer is going to stand out more, especially if the agent and the seller says, hey, this may not appraise. There's a good chance this will not appraise for the price we got accepted. Therefore, the cash offer is a safer offer. So that's why cash is king. And then the other types of financing matters too. So whether there's a bunch of different programs out there, whether it's conventional, VA, FHA, USDA, we don't need to get into all the terms today, but those are great. There's great programs out there to help people that may have, just some disadvantages, or, like a VA program, which is a great program, but there's just more, for veterans, but there's more hoops you got to jump through. So it's not great for the sellers. And so that's something to consider. A conventional offer is less red tape than a VA offer, an FHA offer, USDA offer. So for a seller's perspective, it's less red tape. There's less chances of it, getting, having red flags or having something come up that you have to fix. And so there's more chances of the conventional offer getting approved faster and just easier. So when it comes to the type of financing, that matters. And in a competitive offer situation, when you have more than, a couple offers, a conventional offer is always going to be better than any other type of financing. Of course, cash, conventional than any other type of financing. But there's also a secret to help with getting a conventional offer even more enticing and getting closer to a cash offer. And that's if you can find a way to do what's called an appraisal waiver, where if you're putting 20% down, some lenders will allow you to not do an appraisal waiver. And it's house dependent, it's offer dependent. So you need to have a good lender that's willing to run the numbers for you on an individual house to say, can we get this approved to forego the appraisal? Because again, then you're closer to cash in a sense of there's only one hurdle to get over with financing, and that is getting the buyer approved for the financing. So the end of the day, once you get an offer accepted, the lender then does all their due diligence, even more so than what's called a pre-approval. Then you have getting fully approved for the loan once you're in contract. And that's the other hurdle that financing has to go through. They have to approve, hey, does all the docs line up? Hey, do you have exactly what you said you did earlier? A good lender is going to do as much up front before you make offers, but you never know, something could come up that they didn't know about during that process and not get approved for the loan. And in the Columbus contract, the buyer has the right to walk away from the contract if they do not get approved for the loan. So that is another hurdle that you got to get over with financing, and otherwise you wouldn't have with cash. So those are the two factors of why cash is king, but how to make your offer more enticing if you are doing financing is to, one, try to do a conventional offer as much as possible, and two, try to get an appraisal waiver as much as possible. So those are just a couple ways. The other way is to talk about the condition. The condition matters in what you're offering. When you go into a house and what you're saying, you have the inspection is the next hurdle. It's usually the first hurdle you actually go over when you get in contract. You have the inspection, then appraisal, then financing. So that inspection is always going to be the biggest hurdle to get over. So there's two options there as well. So often in a competitive offer situation, especially here in Columbus, you're going to have to start out by saying, hey, we are okay with the condition it's in currently as we know it. So that you're going to make it what's called an as-is offer. That means you're making an offer that is the house in the condition that it's in. We're not going to ask for anything to be done. We're not going to ask for, hey, there's a little hole in the drywall or a scuff on the floors. We're not going to ask for those things to be fixed. Hey, the window screen is broken. We're not going to ask for that to be fixed. We understand the condition that we're seeing it during the walkthrough, during our showing, is the condition we're getting the house. Now, with that said, you still have the right to an inspection, and you still have the right to walk away due to an inspection. And what I tell all my clients is, if something major comes up during that inspection, whether it's a health and safety issue or a risk to the house, causing something that's going to cause more damage to the house if it's not fixed, as soon as possible. Those two things to think about: health and safety, whether it's like, hey, there's mold in the house, there's maybe it's radon gas, maybe there's code issues, railing issues, stuff like that, and then also like when it comes to damaging the house, whether it's like foundation issues, water leaks, electrical issues that you had no clue about when you walked through the house. Those are things that are kind of gray and are and if you're willing to walk away from it, this is what I tell everyone: hey, if you're willing to walk away, if you're like, hey, we can't buy the house in this condition, you might as well ask for those things to be fixed. Worst case scenario, the seller says, hey, no, we said as is, we're going to move on, and you're okay with that. But if you're willing to walk away due to these major things, and sometimes it is best to walk away because of major things, you might as well ask for them to be fixed, because the seller's most likely going to have to fix them anyways. Whether they go back on market or sell to somebody else, they're going to have to disclose most of those major things. The minor things that you already can tell when you walk through a house, not necessarily, but the things that you couldn't know when an inspector finds, those are things that the seller's most likely going to have to disclose to the next buyer, or if they go back on market. So now you have some leverage to say, hey, we didn't know this, we want the house still, but we can't buy the house in this condition because it's going to, be too much, repair costs that we had no clue about. Ask for those things to be fixed, and worst case scenario, they say no, you're right back to where you started. The other thing you can do to make your offer even stronger, as an agent, I'll never advise this, but you will make your offer stronger to do this, is if you forego the inspection altogether. If like, hey, you're handy, you have a good eye for, a good house versus a bad house. You can see, the foundation when you walk through it. You can see the major components of the house and they're in good condition. And often you can see that the person took care of the house. Then you may decide to forego the inspection altogether. Obviously, that's going to make your offer more enticing. It means because that's the number one reason why houses fall out of contract, and that's the biggest fear of a seller is when they have multiple offers, is picking the wrong offer and going, getting it in contract, going back on the market. Because no matter what the reason, it could just be the the buyers got cold feet for no reason. They just got cold feet and they decided not to buy the house. And all of a sudden the seller has to go back on market. There's a red flag of, well, why did that house go back on market? And so that's the seller's fear. So, having, no inspection, waiving the inspection is the number one reason why houses go back on market. Now is eliminated, your offer is definitely stronger than if you have one that has that. And it may be somebody that had, a terrible situation in the past where the inspection went awry. That's going to be more important for them as a seller than it is, and so understanding those concepts, understanding what's important to the seller is the number one thing to do, is to say, have a good agent that can call that other agent or call the seller, whoever they can get a hold of, and say, hey, what is the most important thing to them? What is the biggest factor? Is it a quick close? Is it, the inspection period? Is it the type of financing? Understanding those things is going to make your offer stronger as well, and really focus on those things outside of price. Again, another thing to talk about is closing and possession. Closing and possessions are two big factors. A quick close versus even a long close may be more important to the seller. They may be buying a house or building a house and they have plenty of time, and actually a longer, getting over those first few hurdles is the most important thing, quick, but then having a longer closing period so they can, not have to move out quite as fast. Often it's a quick close. If you see the house is vacant, hey, there's no one living in there, but they're paying a mortgage, they've already moved on and bought the other house, and a quick close most likely is the best interest to the seller. So understanding that. The other thing you could do is talk about possession. You're allowed to give possession back to the seller after you close and say, hey, we can close on this house in 15 days, 20 days, whatever you decide on, but we can also give you a couple weeks to live there to move out after you close. So the sellers have the understanding and the comfort to know that, hey, the house closed, now I can move out, versus having to move out before the house closes and having this fear of, well, what if the buyers decide just to walk away at the last second? What if something comes up? What if the buyers lose their job the day before closing and now they're not approved for the loan because they have to sign something saying, hey, if anything like that comes up, they have to let their lender know, and they may not qualify for the loan if they lose their job. Good chance they won't. And so, things that are out of the seller's control could happen, and they've already moved all their stuff out, and now they've spent all this money and time moving stuff out, and now they have an empty house to try to sell and go back on market with, which is not going to be as easy as if their house was staged and had their furniture in it. So those are all the fears of sellers. And so how do you overcome that? It's one way is to say, hey, we'll give you a week or two or even a month to make the move and move out. And it may actually be, the most important thing to them is to have that time. They may be looking for another house or another option while they're trying to sell their house first, free up that cash to buy their next house as well, which that is a huge factor in that situation. So those are, kind of the three top ways to think about how to make your offer more enticing, and a lot of it again goes back to what the seller's needs are. The other thing to think about is the what stays, what goes with the house. Sometimes you can say to a seller who has a lot of maybe it's just junk or trash in the house, you can say, hey, you can leave everything in the house. You don't have to get all that stuff out of the garage. We'll take care of it for you. You don't have to move this stuff out. Whatever you want to stay can stay, and whatever you want to take, you can take. And so that's another way to think about it, to give the seller some of their time back and energy and the money that it will cost to maybe get rid of stuff or have stuff boxed up and moved, that you can take care of that for them if you're willing. So there's a couple other little nuances, but otherwise those are the major things that help you get your offer accepted. I know there's a lot that goes into this. Obviously, again, price is going to be a huge factor in these things, but these other, I would say price is typically 90% of the offer and then the 10% of these other minor terms. But these matter, especially in a tight market when you may be within I've had offers that are exactly the same price, and then and this happens often in a multiple offer situation where buyers come to the same conclusion of, hey, this is my highest price I'm willing to go. But then those other terms, that other 10% of the factors, the other part of the offer can make or break the whole deal. So those things are important, and it's important, again, to have somebody that's willing to discover what is important to the seller so you can understand which ones to give, which ones to take on. And the beauty of this is sometimes those things don't matter to a buyer, and they're willing to, negotiate those things and use those as negotiation pieces outside of price. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, I'm always happy to have a conversation with you to kind of understand your individual needs. Again, Columbus is becoming very, neighborhood based when it comes to what the market's doing. So, taking the market as a whole is getting harder and harder to understand what's going on. You're seeing headlines of, hey, more houses on the market, more days on market. It's less competitive than it used to be. But it's true as a whole, but not when it comes to certain neighborhoods. So if you're looking to be in a certain neighborhood that's competitive, this information is going to be critical for you to understand how to get your offer accepted and get you in the house. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.